Hi all, a new day and new stories from Ocean Story. Just listen to this story. My stepmother ruined my dinner party because of her children. They were behaving disgustingly and nothing could stop them. To begin with, my dad divorced my birth mom a long time ago and then found a girl named Samantha. She is a little younger than my dad and had a son of her own, Aaron, before she married my dad. He's 10 years old now and behaves as he pleases. My younger brother Landon was born to Samantha, and he is now 7 years old. Landon completely copies the behavior of his older half-brother. These two children are very annoying to me, not only because Landon and Aaron behave like two tornadoes, but because my dad and Samantha are not very good at regulating their children's behavior. This is because of Samantha's attitude towards the children. Mostly Samantha stays at home with the children and raises them. My dad loves his job, so he spends a lot of time there. I do not like Samantha very much. She talks strangely all the time and can't hold a conversation on any important topics. All Samantha is interested in is sitting on social media or talking about nothing. Also, Samantha can often be rude and behave very selfishly. To avoid conflicts with her, I just started going to my dad and his wife's house less often. I don't want to annoy myself every time I see Samantha. My wife, Maya, can't stand my dad's family either. They all live as if they are every man for himself. I decided to organize a family party in honor of my wife, who got a promotion at work that she had been striving for 2 years. Because we don't have children, life is a little easier for Maya and me. Before inviting my dad's family, I talked to him and set certain conditions. I told my dad that he could come with Samantha and the kids if they would keep an eye on Aaron and Landon. Since the last time the children had ruined our Christmas celebration because of their dissatisfaction with their gifts, my wife was also against my dad's kids ruining it again. So it's either we celebrate quietly and without too much noise, or my dad's family goes about their business. My dad said, "Son, I'll do everything I can to keep the kids from disturbing the celebration." I took my dad's word for it and believed him that it would be so. Not many people were invited to the celebration, about 20 people. As I expected, the children were not ready to behave all the time. I have to honor my dad. His promise lasted no more than 20 minutes. So after 20 minutes, Aaron and Landon started running around my house and yard. They almost knocked over a few dishes I was carrying to the holiday table. For the first hour, I endured the behavior of my dad's children, hoping that Samantha or he would settle the situation and talk to the kids. But I didn't see Samantha or my dad talking to their children or trying to punish them for their bad behavior. I had to catch Aaron and Landon on my own and ask them to calm down or I would kick them out of my territory. This had some effect on them, but not for long. The behavior of my dad's children annoyed not only me, but also my wife. She began to demand that I talk to Samantha. In the end, I went to my dad because I didn't want to talk to his wife. My dad said that he didn't see anything wrong with his children's behavior and that they didn't need to be calmed down. I told him that Aaron and Landon had almost ruined a few dishes, but my dad didn't really care. He was more interested in when everything would be ready to eat. I had to go to Samantha and deal with her. That was the last thing I wanted to do, because Samantha's reaction could have been the same as my dad's. I approached Samantha while she was drinking champagne. She pretended not to notice me for a few seconds. I turned to Samantha and asked her to turn her attention to Aaron and Landon. She told me that I was doing a pretty good job of keeping an eye on them and everything was fine. I stopped tolerating such responses from these adults and told her, "Samantha, are you sure you are watching your children? Because 3 minutes ago Aaron was running after my dog all over the house and screaming very loudly. All the people were paying attention and shouting for Aaron to calm down. And at this time, you are sitting at the table and calmly drinking champagne. Go and do something with your kids." Samantha said, "You want me to run after Aaron and Landon all over the house and try to stop them?" I told her, "Yes, you should do that. That's why I'm doing it for you." She replied to me, "If you or Maya don't like something, that's your problem. My children are playing a little bit, and you are very critical about it." When Samantha said that to me, I immediately told her to get up from the table and leave my party. Samantha was very unhappy and started to say that I allow myself too much. I reminded her that we had certain conditions that she and her husband had to keep. Samantha was really annoyed and said I was an asshole. She went to my dad and started complaining about me for kicking her out of the party. My dad started arguing with me, and Samantha kept interjecting her words between our pauses. A lot of people gathered around us and listened to our argument. My dad did not want to admit that his children were disobedient and spoiling the holiday for everyone. I had to yell at my dad and chase his family out of my wife's party. Samantha kept telling me that Maya and I were being very impudent and had no right to kick them out. The whole situation ruined our celebration. My wife is very angry with me for bringing my dad and his crazy family to her party. My dad does not want to talk to me, and Samantha is tweeting about how Maya and I are freaks. What was I supposed to do in this situation? If I didn't kick my dad's family out, Aaron and Landon would have torn my house apart, but I couldn't ignore my wife. Otherwise, Maya would hate me. All my guests were very grateful when I kicked my dad's family out, so I think I did the right thing, even though I have such negative consequences. Willow, your dad's family is really crazy. Maya shouldn't be mad at you because you wanted to do the best for your whole family. So the behavior of your dad's children has nothing to do with you. I find it frightening that your father's and Samantha's inability to deal with their children's disruptive behavior shows a significant lack of parental responsibility. Parents have a primary responsibility to ensure that their children behave well, especially in social situations. Their inaction not only disrupted the party, but also demonstrated a disregard for their role as caregivers. When you set clear conditions for your father and his family to attend the party, including monitoring their children's behavior, they agreed to those conditions. However, their inability to abide by these conditions shows a lack of respect for your wishes as host. Your father does not think about the good of other people. Kinsley, you weren't supposed to invite your relatives to the Mayan holiday at all. If she was against it in the first place, then why did you convince Maya to give you permission to invite your dad and his family? Because in a way, you knew that Aaron and Landon could ruin the party. The blame is primarily on you, and only then on your dad and his wife. If you don't recognize that, you're a complete fool. Your wife wanted to have a peaceful holiday. You took away such an important holiday from Maya. She is rightfully angry with you. You need to apologize to her and admit that you are at fault. Jonathan, instead of approaching the problem of your children's behavior in a mature way and finding a solution, your dad and Samantha have resorted to defensive and dismissive communication, their unwillingness to engage constructively. This has escalated the situation and disrupted the celebration. Your father's unwillingness to acknowledge his children's disgusting behavior and Samantha's unwillingness to intervene indicates an inability to prioritize family and social harmony. In such situations, parents should come first. Comfort and enjoyment of the event for all participants. Their unwillingness to do so led to a public dispute, which overshadowed the celebration, and I have to admit that I'm a big part of the problem. You shouldn't have just assumed that your dad's family would be adequate just because you had agreed to it. You should have thought of several options for the development of events. Then maybe the holiday could have been saved. Next story. I have been living with my girlfriend for a very long time. Naomi and I are not married, and we think that we are getting along well. Without the usual marriage obligations, we do not have children or pets. We are busy with our work and each other. 2 weeks ago, my girlfriend Naomi's brother Nolan came to visit her. He has no family or children. He came to stay with us for 1 week. While he is on vacation at work, Nolan hadn't come to visit us for a long time, and he was very excited to see his sister. We have a good relationship with Nolan. We even went fishing with him several times. A few days later, my girlfriend told me that it would be nice to have a celebratory dinner in honor of Nolan's arrival. I thought it was a good idea because I have a talent for cooking. I chose the option to roast meat and bake potatoes and vegetables. In the evening, we sat down to celebrate Nolan's arrival. He said that he had eaten a few burgers earlier in the day, and now he was feeling a little nauseous and didn't want to eat. Nolan just sat with us all evening and drank apple juice. I didn't make a very large portion because there were only 3 of us. Nolan said he didn't really like to eat much meat as we talked, so when dinner came to an end, there was a little bit of the dish I had prepared left over, so I put it in the fridge for the night and we all went to bed because I had to leave early the next day for my business. In the morning, I got up and there was nothing in the fridge to eat, except the dish I had prepared for dinner yesterday. I ate all the meat and leftover potatoes and went about my business, because I was running a little late. Less than 2 hours later, Naomi called me and asked where I had put the food that hadn't been finished yesterday. I told her that I had eaten everything early in the morning because I didn't have time to cook for myself. Naomi scolded me a bit and said that I shouldn't have touched the food that was meant for Nolan. I apologized and said I could buy something to eat on the way home to make up for it. But at that time, something worse happened than just the fact that Nolan couldn't eat meat and potatoes in the morning. He was very offended that I ate his food. Nolan told my wife that he would really like to try the meal I cooked yesterday, but unfortunately, we won't be able to do that now. Naomi was angry about this, so she made a quick breakfast for herself and Nolan, then called me. She said that her brother was very upset and didn't really want to eat anything, so I have to fix the whole situation. Otherwise, I will get in trouble later. I asked her what I could do, and Naomi told me to think of something. You are a very brilliant cook. Of course, Naomi said this with great sarcasm. At that moment, I had no idea what I could buy to cook and make Nolan happy. I decided not to make anything up and went to the store to buy new meat and make an exclusively meat and vegetable dish. To apologize to Nolan a little bit, I took a lamb tenderloin and bought the freshest vegetables I could find. I called Naomi and told her that I had done some shopping at home. Naomi replied to me, "I hope you don't make a mistake this time." I came home and started building a fire to roast the meat. At about 6 in the evening, everything was ready to eat. Naomi and Nolan were out at the time, so it was a bit of a surprise for them. I heard someone come in. It was Naomi, but without her brother. She told me that my brother was very offended by the whole situation this morning and didn't want to come to dinner. This made me very sad and made me feel like a jerk. I went to the house to the room where Nolan was. Nolan said I didn't want to eat anything today. I told him that I had bought expensive meat for him and cooked it according to the best recipe I knew. Nolan thanked me but refused to go to the table and have dinner. I didn't want to crawl on my knees in front of him and went outside. Naomi started asking me about her brother. I told her, "Your brother does not want to come to the table with us, so we will have dinner without him tonight." Naomi said I would not eat either if my brother did not eat. That was the last straw of my patience. I started to argue loudly with Naomi and told her that she and Nolan were ungrateful pigs who could only complain. That night I slept in the living room and didn't want to see anyone at all. The next morning I didn't have to go anywhere. I got up a little earlier than everyone else and sat at the table eating. Suddenly I heard someone leave the room. It was Nolan with his things. He wanted to leave early in the morning. I stopped him and started telling him to calm down and not to do such a stupid thing. Nolan told me that I didn't want to stay in a house where there were quarrels and disagreements, especially if you can't control your stomach. After Nolan's words, I didn't keep him at my place. I told him, "Nolan, you're behaving like a shit. When I cooked you one of the best meals in the world, you didn't want to eat it and showed your disrespect for me. You know what? Get out of here and don't come back until you grow up." Nolan left my house and said, "I won't come here anymore as long as you are such a jerk." 1 hour later, Naomi woke up and asked where my brother was. I told her that Nolan had left our house early in the morning and I didn't bother to keep him. Naomi screamed at me and said that I had become an incredible bastard in the last 2 days. Now she doesn't want to put up with me, and she thinks it's my fault that Nolan left our house. Was I supposed to put up with Nolan's stupid behavior and let him insult my food? Jeremiah, one of the fundamental problems here is the complete lack of communication and understanding between everyone. When Nolan expressed his nausea and unwillingness to eat the dinner prepared for him, it was an opportunity for mutual understanding. Instead of calmly discussing his preferences or possible alternatives, tensions rose, leading to unnecessary conflict. I think you lacked effective communication. In this situation, it was sorely lacking. Your decision to eat the leftovers intended for Nolan, without any consultation or consideration for others, was incredibly inconsiderate and offensive. Not only did it demonstrate a lack of respect for your girlfriend's family, but it also contributed to the situation. It is very important to remember that when you share living space and food with other people, a certain level of shared responsibility and respect for each other's preferences is expected. That is, if you didn't have time to cook a full breakfast in the morning, you could have had a quick coffee and stopped by a place on your way to get something to eat, but you decided to take someone else's food, thinking that you wouldn't be punished for it. Alia, another glaring problem is the inability to manage conflict effectively, resorting to yelling, name-calling, and insulting language. Both in your conversation with Naomi and Nolan, such behavior does not solve problems, but rather exacerbates them and further damages the relationship. Your decision to tell Nolan to leave and not come back until he grows up reflects a refusal to compromise and work toward a peaceful resolution. While Nolan's initial reaction to the situation may not have been ideal, an attitude of understanding and willingness to find common ground would have been a more mature and constructive approach. Refusing to compromise can lead to long-term negative consequences in the relationship. You have not only offended Nolan, but also your wife Naomi. I think you should have admitted that you were at fault and stopped trying to play the victim, because you think Naomi and Nolan are to blame for this. But there would have been no conflict if you had overcome your own hunger and not eaten other people's food. Deal with yourself first and only then blame other people. A story that really surprised me. For quite a long time, I was married to my wife, Everly. She became a stepmother to my son, Hudson, who was 7 years old. My wife did not like my son very much. Everly did not like children very much, especially if the child was not her own. I tried many times to make sure that Everly could accept and love Hudson. We went to various attractions and walks. We spent a lot of time together as a family, but none of it had any good results. I am no longer married to Everly, and I don't want to have any kind of relationship with her. It all happened when I was in the hospital with Hudson for a week. He was very severely poisoned and I was looking after him. On Thursday night, I was going back to the hospital to be with my son at night. When I got there, 2 hours later, I realized that I had not taken the things that Hudson had asked me to take. Thank God I had a car and could get home quickly. When I arrived at my house, I saw an unfamiliar shadow in the kitchen. I thought it was a burglar, so I quietly entered the house and saw my cousin Christian's sneakers on the doorstep. It surprised me a bit because he never came home so late. I relaxed a bit, but my wife or Christian was nowhere to be found. After a moment, I heard strange noises coming from the bedroom. Unfortunately, I saw that Christian was in bed with my wife. We had a loud fight. I almost beat Christian and threw him out the window naked. Everly tried to stop me and yelled at me to calm down. I told her, "Everly, shut your mouth." I went out and took the things Hudson asked me for and went to his hospital. Everything inside me was broken, as if I had jumped off a cliff. I spent the next 2 days with my son, trying not to remember anything that happened to me that night. Then I went to kick Everly out of my house. She took her things and left. I didn't say anything to her when I arrived except, "Get out of my house." Everly tried to talk me into understanding her and not taking any urgent action. I didn't answer her and pointed her to the door with my eyes. A few hours later, Everly took all her things and left. Christian welcomed her into his home. For a long time, I did not tell my son what happened between me and Everly. I partially revealed the truth to Hudson when I told him that Everly was no longer living with us and we would not see her. To be honest, Hudson was even a little bit happy, but he was sad that I was alone again, and he doesn't really have any mom. I promised my son that he would not be alone, and we would find a wonderful mom for him. At that moment, I was interested in settling the whole thing with Everly, because a lot of my friends and relatives wanted to know why I kicked Everly out and under what circumstances she started living with Christian. I had to tell all my friends and family that Everly had decided to cheat on me with my cousin. Many people started criticizing Everly, and she lost all favor from my friends and parents. 3 years after those events, I got married again, but to a new girl. Anna became a great mom to Hudson and never had any problems communicating with him. She has become a great wife for me, and Anna is now pregnant with my child. I am very happy to have a child with such a wonderful woman. As for my ex, Everly is now living with Christian. Their relationship is on the rocks, and things are not going well. Christian did not want to have a family with her and was not ready for a relationship with children. He was only interested in having a romantic relationship and nothing more. I can say that in fact, Christian left Everly and does not want to be her husband for the rest of his life. In the whole situation, I only feel sorry for the child, who was born from such a jerk as Christian. To my ex Everly, she has help from her parents, who finance her and the little child. As much as I feel sorry for Everly, I will not help her. Everly made a decision 3 years ago, and she has to take responsibility for it. That's what I told her parents when they asked me for help. I told them no, I would not help Everly in any way. They are angry with me and think that I am no better than Christian. My wife said, "You don't owe Everly anything. You should not think about it and take responsibility for her mistakes." Everly also asked me for help, but I didn't even listen to her requests. Some people might think I'm a heartless bastard. I can forgive everything, but not betrayal. Thank you all for your attention. Now write your opinion. Caroline, I'll start by saying that you've chosen a less than classy method of bringing your wife Everly and your son Hudson closer together. Everly's dislike of your son Hudson is disconcerting, but your attempts to bridge the gap have fallen far short. Instead of addressing the underlying issues, you've relied on superficial outings and family time to try to build a connection. What would have been more appropriate would have been a genuine attempt to understand Everly's issues and help her build a positive relationship with your son. In addition, upon learning of Everly's affair with your cousin Christian, your reaction was shockingly violent and aggressive. Physically assaulting Christian and threatening to harm him is not only unjustified, but also illegal and dangerous. Such actions are never an acceptable way to deal with emotional distress and betrayal. I am well aware that the situation was critical, but to rush at someone and threaten them would not have solved the situation. Hunter, I don't even know how to explain it correctly to a child who is 7 years old that you broke up with Everly because she slept with his uncle. Although you eventually informed Hudson of Everly's departure, it is clear that you kept him in the dark about the real reasons for a significant period of time. This lack of communication may have been emotionally traumatizing for Hudson. I've never been in a situation like that, but I can tell you for sure, man, you have good mirrors for not beating Christian. If I were in your shoes, I would definitely not have kept my cool, because I can't even imagine my wife cheating on me with someone who was part of my family. I probably did exactly what you did. The people who judge you have no idea how hard it is to go through when your loved one sleeps with someone else. You are not the jerk in this situation, and you should not help Everly. It's really her own fault that she has the life she has now. Caroline, I think that regardless of the circumstances of your breakup with Everly, your refusal to provide any help or support when her relationship with Christian is breaking down comes across as harsh and unsympathetic. While you are under no obligation to offer financial or practical assistance, it would be more humane to show some degree of empathy or willingness to help with matters concerning your son in common. Your unyielding stance, which seems to lack flexibility or consideration for the evolving situation, raises concerns about your capacity for forgiveness and empathy. While you have the right to feel betrayed, it is important to recognize that people can make mistakes and circumstances can change. Your unwillingness to provide any form of support, even when Everly is facing difficulties, can be seen as a lack of empathy and compassion. I think it's very fair that some people think you're a jerk. You could be helping Everly right now, but you choose to just ignore her problems. I thank you all for your opinions and comments. I want to add a little bit to this story. One day my mom called me and said, "I'm really sorry about Everly. After all, she is also part of our family. I want to invite her to my birthday party and give her a few $1,000s. I said to my mom, if you invite Everly to your birthday party, you can't even expect to get $1,000. You can't even expect me to come with my family to your party. My mom was very upset and said, "Son, you need to leave your resentments behind and move on with your life." I told my mom, this is just your opinion and I don't support it. And again, because of Everly, I had a conflict in my family. I never went to my mom's birthday party and became the center of discussion and judgment from my family. So now I don't have a relationship with my mom, and everyone thinks I'm an asshole. Nova, again and again, you try to justify your indifferent behavior. Even when your own mother wanted to help Everly, you started acting like a hurt boy. You're really acting quite strange. Your whole family was able to survive what Everly did. You're the only one who resents her and can't forget how Everly betrayed you with Christian. You probably wish that instead of Everly you had another girl. Who would love your son? Eventually, you married Anna and have a nice family. So forget your resentment and start helping Everly. Maybe you don't have to, but your help will show what a good person you are. My next story. For a long time, I lived with my Aunt Genesis and her husband Connor. My parents entrusted me to them while I went to college. I am now 22 years old and will soon graduate. So far, I don't have a specific plan for how I'm going to move forward in my career. My new guardians often give me different advice on how to live and act better. Even though my aunt is not a model of a cool life or a person who acts very wisely, so I don't really listen to Connor's or Genesis's advice. Most of the time, I just have to listen to them and pretend to agree with them. My aunt is always complaining to my parents that I don't listen to her and do what I want. My mom always asks me to listen to Genesis because I live in her house. My aunt and her husband do not have a lot of money, and they only have enough money for basic things like food and utilities. If Genesis wants to get some equipment or something stupid, she has to take out a loan for it and pay several months of debt. That's about the situation with money in my aunt's family. Along with my studies, I have a part-time job and earn several $1,000s a month. This is enough to cover my needs and to give some money to Genesis for my accommodation, because my parents are not able to send me money every month. Once my boyfriend Eli said we could live in his apartment because his parents bought it once and they don't really need it now. I was very interested in Eli's offer and agreed. It gave me a chance to be free from the endless advice of Genesis and her husband Connor. I told my aunt that I was going to move out of her house. For a long time, she was against it and said I shouldn't do it. I didn't care what she thought about it. Genesis called my mother many times, telling her to forbid me to change my place of residence. My mother refused Genesis because I am not 14 anymore and I can decide where I live. Eventually, I managed to pack my things and move out of Genesis and Connor's house. My boyfriend was very surprised that my aunt was so against us living together. Eli said, "Your aunt knows very well that I love you and want to marry you. Why is she reacting like this?" I couldn't find an answer to his question because it was a very big mystery to me. Only later did I find out that Genesis and Connor didn't want to be alone, so they wanted to keep me in their home. It was like I was a pet for them. But then things got a little more interesting. Connor had taken out a car loan and was paying it off with Genesis. That month, Connor was a little sick and didn't get much of a paycheck, so he and Genesis had some debt on the loan. Connor asked me to lend him some money. Otherwise, their debt would continue to grow, and they might get penalties to pay. I agreed to give them a certain amount. At the time, I had saved some money to go to my friend's house. My aunt asked me for $2,000. It wasn't a lot of money for me, but I decided to agree. Connor promised me that he would pay me back in the next 2 months. When the debt was due, Connor only gave me $300. This was not enough, as I had a few weeks left before my trip. I asked Connor and Genesis to expedite my refund. Suddenly, my aunt started accusing me of not having the money to spare. Genesis started blaming me and saying, "If you lived with us, you would not spend so much money on yourself and separate accommodation." I was shocked when my aunt answered me so rudely. We talked to my aunt for a few days about the situation, but Genesis thinks I don't understand her situation, and I put a lot of pressure on her and Connor. I got tired of it and said, "If you do not return my money in 1 week, you and Connor can forget about our family relationship." My aunt was very angry with me for saying that and told my mom that I was a big selfish person. At first, my mom agreed with Genesis and asked me not to rush my aunt. However, when I told my mom that in 2 months Genesis and Connor had only paid me back $300, she changed her mind. My mom started blaming my sister and told Connor to pay me back what he owed me. Because of these circumstances, Genesis believes that I turned my mom against it. I had to go on my trip at the expense of other funds that Eli and I had been saving. It's not a big deal, but I wanted to avoid it. My aunt thinks that I did the wrong thing, and I shouldn't have put so much pressure on her with Connor. But when I tell her that you promised to pay me back in 2 months, and now it's been 3 months, and you still haven't given me more than $300, my aunt changes the subject or just doesn't say anything back. Am I really to blame for the fact that my aunt and her husband are not paying me back? Amelia, your aunt and her husband have been very unfair to you. Genesis and Connor's actions can be seen as exploitative, as they appear to have used you for financial support while you were living with them. Their unwillingness to allow you to move out when you found an opportunity to gain independence suggests that they may have been more concerned about your financial contributions than your overall well-being and personal growth. True family support should encompass more than just the financial aspects. When Connor asked for a loan to cover his debt, you were quite reasonable in agreeing, especially since you had saved money for a planned trip. However, the fact that he didn't keep his end of the bargain and didn't pay back the loan as promised is a sign of financial irresponsibility. People should take financial obligations seriously and fulfill them on time, especially if they are so smart. If they have constantly taught you morals, or they are just very smart in words, but in reality, they fail in their desires and capabilities. Ezra, my parents are very similar to your aunt. I could have done something important for them, but when I needed something from my parents, they could ignore me. It was very annoying and frustrating for me to have parents. Genesis and Connor's reaction to your request to repay the loan was disappointing. By accusing you of wanting to pay back the money and suggesting that living with them would save you money, they demonstrated a severe lack of empathy and understanding. They failed to recognize the importance of your financial need and instead focused on placing blame and accusing you of something. Your aunt's attempt to portray you as a selfish person who wants the money back and her claim that you manipulated your mother into turning against them were manipulative tactics to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. Is this adequate behavior from a reasonable person? Your aunt is a very cunning person who does not want to fulfill her words at all. I find this very disgusting. I wouldn't be surprised if Genesis justifies that it helped you all through your university years, so it won't refund your money at all. That would be the height of Genesis' selfishness. Kennedy, I'm surprised that your mother initially believed Genesis and didn't want to ask you about the circumstances that arose between you and Genesis. You had to prove to your mom that Genesis and Connor owed you money. Why is it that some people can take their own needs so seriously, but when it comes to doing something for others that they owe debtors can be so oblivious to their responsibilities? Your aunt has received the amount of money she wants from you, and she's not interested in anything else. I don't think Connor really wanted to pay you back. You showed them love, and how did Connor and Genesis repay you? You shouldn't have any more contact with them. They lost their reputation the day they started making a theater of their debt. Now I want to tell a different story. Not long ago, I started living with my girlfriend Alina. We have a plan to get married in 7 months. In fact, Alina is my fiancée. After 3 weeks of living with Alina, I faced one problem. Alina is an aunt to her niece Sarah and nephew Easton. These are young children who are 8 and 6 years old. My girlfriend loves children very much and often spends her time with Sarah and Easton. Sometimes I feel like Alina is a mom to her nephews. My girlfriend works from home and can pay attention to her nephews. Sarah and Easton often come to our house with Alina after their classes and stay with us for several hours. Since we live 2 houses away from them, in general, my girlfriend's family has a good tradition of visiting their relatives. However, in my opinion, you need to know the limit in this. Otherwise, it turns out that relatives start living with us. Like the example of my girlfriend's 2 nephews. My friends say that I don't like children, so I react so strongly to the fact that Sarah and Easton are often in my house. In fact, I do like children, but only if they are in moderation and not sitting on my couch every day. Recently, my relationship with Elena has deteriorated. She says everything is fine and there is no point in worrying. However, every time I come home from work, Elena sits with her sister's children and doesn't pay me any attention. I can only talk to her when it's dinner time. This is what irritates me, not the specific presence of children in our house. Last week, I came in a little upset about my boss at work. When I got home, I wanted to tell Elena everything and ask her to support me or give me advice. But when I got home, I saw that Sarah and Easton were back at our house. It really made me angry. I wanted to talk to my girlfriend, but Elena said, "I'm busy right now, let's talk later." I went to my friend and told him about my asshole boss and that I couldn't share it with my girlfriend. My friend supported me and advised me to talk to Elena so that she would limit the time when her nephews could come to us. His advice was very good, and I thought it was time to talk to Elena about it. A few hours later, I returned home in a good mood. However, I was a little nervous before talking to Elena. I knew for sure that she would not immediately agree with my thoughts. Everything happened as I expected. Elena told me that her nephews could not interfere with our relationship, and I was very much on edge. I started to prove to Elena that I couldn't even talk to her properly because of the kids. Then I told Elena about the situation. That had happened a few hours ago. She didn't want to admit that Sarah and Easton were in our house too often. Again, I was upset because Elena and I had a conflict. The next day, I started talking to Elena again. My girlfriend said that she needed time to give up her children because she had been with them for a very long time and was used to them being constantly on her back. I suggested that starting this week, Sarah and Easton should come to us 3 times, and then, over time, no more than once a week. Elena said, "That's too fast. I need at least a month or 2. I told her that was too long. We had another fight with her. I got tired of it all and called my wife's sister. Ariana answered the phone and I told her, "From now on, I forbid your children to come to my house more than once a week. If Sarah and Easton come over more than once, I will just kick them out and send them back home." Ariana said that I am too rude and she would like me to be more polite. Now the whole family thinks I'm a jerk who hates kids. My wife yelled at me for calling Ariana on my own. Maybe I really made a mistake giving that answer to my wife's sister. No one in my family wants to understand that I want to spend time with my wife and not to watch Elena forever busy with her nephews. Elias, dude, I really sympathize with you. I had a similar situation, but with my own children. My wife used to babysit our kids all the time. Even when they got a little older, my wife tried to be there for them. This resulted in me having very little time with my wife. Our relationship was strained, and we almost got divorced. What helped us was that we went to couples therapy and started paying attention to each other. Don't let your girlfriend Elena be with her nephews anymore. You're not even married, but she's already put you on the back burner. Children are not the problem. There are problems with adults who are not able to choose the right attitude towards these children. You were a little rude, and that's your only mistake in this story. Colton, your story has some problems. In this case, both parties seem to be talking past each other, leading to frustration, confusion, and ultimately conflict. Instead of working together to solve their problems, they get into arguments, causing emotional tension. I can be more specific about this. Your point of view is important, but we should also take into account Elena's point of view. Elena has a close bond with her niece and nephew, which the narrator should recognize and respect. She may need time to get used to seeing them less often. Instead of imposing a strict schedule, you should engage in an empathetic conversation to find a balance that respects both Elena's connection to her family and their relationship as a couple. This will yield more results than you simply forcing your girlfriend to give up her nephews. You probably don't have a sibling, and it's hard for you to understand how difficult it is for someone to stop seeing a loved one. If you continue to be so harsh, you can't expect to have a good relationship with Elena. Cameron, your decision to call Elena's sister, Ariana, and place restrictions on Sarah and Easton's visits without first consulting Elena was a major mistake. Not only did it worsen the relationship between you and Elena, but it also created tension with other family members. This action undermined trust and demonstrated a lack of respect for Elena's autonomy in managing her family relationships. Such issues are best resolved between the two of you through open dialogue and compromise, rather than involving external parties. Moreover, your decision was rather impulsive. The only right thing to do is to apologize to your girlfriend and allow her to gradually reduce her time with her nephews. Any other methods will have negative consequences for you. Don't be a fool and think not only about yourself and your comfort.